the beginning of the presentation, we're going to give a very quick rundown of the project that we're here presenting to you. This is the Essaim project, the swarm project. The creative topic, the material that we're working on is biological swarms, but in this case, robotic swarms, which is one of the research fields of my laboratory at the university, how we interact with swarms of robots. So I think that it's important to understand what a swarm is in the first place, because unfortunately or fortunately, swarms of robots are very present in pop culture, but often they're poorly defined. You'll see a lot of swarms, the drone swarms that are used during some shows, such as Olympic opening ceremonies, but they are not swarms in the sense of robotic intelligence. They're centralized systems that revolve around a single fixed point. A swarm, as it is in nature, so what inspires us as engineers and scientists, is completely decentralized. All of the individuals are independent but working together to achieve a given goal. So you could remove a control station on the ground and they would still be able to behave autonomously. Individuals can be swapped in and out and they are replaceable. And these traits of robotic swarms become a creative opportunity for us and can be applied to puppeteering, movement, dance. These become vectors for creative processes. Let's introduce our team. There are a lot of people on our team, and in fact, we have quite a lot of students in engineering and art, including Audrey Rochette, who is with us right here in the room. This is a synergistic, multi-field team, and the people you can see on the screen are the engineers and the artists who work with us. We have a puppeteer, 2 choreographers, a movement analyst, Giovanni Beltram from Polytechnic in Montreal, and we also have Daniel Lecourtois, Marcel Ludon, and Geneviève Dussault. Basically, we're bringing together all of the sensitive resources from sound research with Magali Babé, our sound specialist, and all different sorts of materials and things that are recycled and used for our extra studies and investigations as we study the movements of swarms. We're currently in the middle of a 2-year project, but we have a large team and lots of different teams working on different things, and then they kind of come together. This is sort of an excuse to bring together multiple research teams and multiple creative teams together around a single thing. The 2-year research project includes artist residencies and what we call labs, and we'll bring artists, scientists, and students all together in the same place for 2 weeks, artists and engineers, so that they can create things together. And that is how we push back the frontiers of swarms and expressions of being a swarm. At the ADS, the engineering school, students can come and join us. They can come into the labs and they can directly interface with the engineers and the students who are working there already, and some other interesting things that go on at ETS. Now we'd like to share with you a short video. It's a 2-minute video clip that will show you what we get up to during those 2 weeks. We've already had 2 of our labs. We had the one mid-2022, then there was one early 2023. Autumn 2023 will be the opportunity to wrap up some of our communications and ideas, and then March 2024. And there are some things on the timeline that don't make a huge amount of sense. We kind of tweak things as we go.
On sait que ça fonctionne mieux avec l'univers épais. Dans le fond, là, c'est ça, hein, tu vois, une meilleure définition quand c'est vraiment plus près de la langue. Oui. Pas pire. Ouais, c'est fou, hein?
Okay, so I'll try the other stripping.
Oh, you're looking.
Yeah, that's a different drone.
This one is mine.
Yeah, I thought that was mine.
Oh.
Là, ce qu'on va vous montrer, c'est surtout d'abord une écoute comme les entendre, mais puis les voir aussi de façon acoustique. Puis ensuite, je vais mettre un micro-contact sur la surface. Le micro-contact va amplifier leur mouvement, leur déplacement. Et après, vous allez voir aussi que le micro-contact sert un peu d'obstacle aussi, ce qui fait bifurquer ou en tout cas qui a un effet sur leur comportement, sur leur déplacement.
Si on a à côtoyer la technologie, pourquoi ne pas la rendre plus expressive, plus esthétique, pas dans l'idée du joli esthétique, mais de penser comment ces essaims-là évoluent dans leur environnement autrement que par leur fonctionnalité.
Ils sont en train de visiter tes omoplates. Donc peut-être leur offrir du relief. Ils sont à ta tête maintenant. Tes omoplates, ça glisse le long de ton dos, ton bassin, ta jambe droite. Merci.
Okay, we're going to throw over to the next team. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. Here we go. Now, our project is also a PRISM project funded by the Quebec Technology and Art Fund. It's all about quantum mechanics, which is a quite general term, but we're studying it from a couple of different viewpoints with a whole range of researchers. We have 3 ETS researchers, plus Jean-Ambroise, who's a digital art teacher. Within our team, we have Bora Ung, who's an electrical engineer teacher and photovoltaic expert. Keiwen Zhang is our IT and blockchain specialist. I'm a teacher and researcher on construction materials. Jean-Ambroise for digital art, and Etienne Bayeron, our sculptor. The aim is to create something that is physical, but that represents concepts that may be a little bit harder to wrap your head around, like blockchain or quantum computing. This is a creative process that's ongoing to create an art installation that will be interactive in nature, and there will also be an augmented reality component to it. What we would like is to create a kind of game in which participants could create a signal that would change the way our sculpture is lit. And the sculpture is going to be made out of concrete. We're still currently prototyping it, and then we'll know more. So light, quantum computing, concrete. We're still wondering whether we can turn material into light, so we still have a kind of thought process going on about light and materials. We have involved a creation process, kind of design thinking based process, into which we have integrated through residencies and practice other artists, professional artists involved in dance, in theatre, art installations, and also researchers from other universities who were bringing their knowledge to us at that time. As you can see, we're about halfway through the process, the second step. The aim is to have something artistic, something that can be shown off, but also to have a mediation space in VR that can be a place for expression of the sculpture. During our last residency with the sculpture and with other teams, we had a lot of discussions on all sorts of things. As you'll see, our first prototype was a triangle, and then working with the sculptor, he showed me some pictures that inspired him, and he gave us some pictures of portlandite. This is the structural component to concrete. And I have a student who works on molecular modeling. We found pictures online, and then I worked with my PhD student and said, look, could you create a model of this, and then we'll reuse that model. So as you can see, we kind of have a unit, and it's like the atoms are each individual researcher, and then they can get assembled into supercells, and then we have the top view of the structure, which contains the same concepts as in our sculpture. The idea was to have a triangle, a prism, because the program that funded us is called Prism, and we want to have a structure that looks like a prism, but also our microstructure looks like a prism too. What you should take away from this slide is that we have tried to bring together contact points between materials that can have artistic properties as well as making sense from a scientific and practical standpoint. And this was at the height of the second year of the pandemic.
C'est la séance d'immersion au milieu de pratique.
This is our immersion sequence where we visit the lab, we try to get to know each other.
Une forme assez classique finalement.
This is a pretty traditional way to brainstorm things.
Mais qui a apporté aussi un transfert de...
But it was also an opportunity to share practices, cultural practices that seep into more engineering and scientific-based structures.
C'est notre prototype.
And here we have our prototype. Yes, this was V1 for our augmented reality surface, using a concrete surface as our anchor point. My inner artist wanted to have some kind of concrete part to this sculpture to position things in real space.
En fait, comme artiste, j'ai souvent l'habitude d'avoir...
As an artist, I tend to try and find flows or data, something that has meaning. It can be a walk, it can be a visit, it can be anything. But quantum mechanics is a concept. And my tool set as an artist was to try and find agency in quantum mechanics. And I would constantly be frustrated by not having the language. As far as I understand, there's no time, there's no substance, there's no identity. So does that notion have its own agency, or is it down to me as a researcher to use the unthinkable, this mind object that I can't wrap my head around, and to see that as my own limits that require me to refine my own concepts. At the ETS, they generate batches of data. I think it's called a QRD. I turned that data into a light source that I can use, so I really had to rethink the concepts so I could use them. There you go. I'm sure we'll have time to get further into this. Patrick.
Alors, rebonjour. Je vais vous parler du...
Hello again. I'm here to tell you about the Animate project. Animate is a project from a collaboration between McGill University, Concordia, and university in Germany. It's quite a wide-reaching project. And the highlight of the project was a show that was held for the first time last summer in Weimar in Germany at the Art Festival, which happened over 10 days. There were about 400 people who came through the installation in groups of 12. So this is an immersive theatre experience in extended reality. The story behind the show comes from a novel on climate disasters. The book takes us through the story of Daniel and Laurie in Canada, and they travel to the Devil Lands, where the Earth's mantle comes to the surface, a kind of mystical land. They kind of experience it as a retreat. They discover themselves and each other. And as part of this story, we are given understanding of the climate disaster that we're in right now, how imminent it is and how serious it is. So the idea of this show is to get people into the disaster, not by showing them numbers or facts, but by giving them the experience of living through it. The show is broken down into 3 different parts. The first part is in this space here. At least this is how we presented it in Weimar. The show was also given elsewhere around Germany. This summer, there are plans to take it to Italy and Quebec. So this isn't the single configuration, but this is the one that I witnessed myself. This is the first part of the show, and this is just theatre. Old-style analog theatre with actors on the wooden stumps and 12 people standing around watching them. So this is the performative part of the first part of the show. Then the actors and the participants move into a second space, which is actually a huge abandoned warehouse, an abandoned factory in East Germany, which was a potato processing plant. And we use this huge space, a quite solemn space, through just how industrial it is in its nature. And we equip the participants with virtual reality headsets, and we immerse them into virtual reality. We give them a rope, and they get pulled around by the actors, so they can't see anything or hear anything, and they get pulled through the story by this rope in their hand. And then the final part of the show is when their field of view opens up and they are allowed to see what the physical space they're in actually looks like. And we have superimposed a reflection field over the reality of what's around them. There are also reflections on the ground that are present naturally. And then things move around, things attack the audience, things shift, they gather into a big sphere that blows up and spirals around them and all sorts of things. And the aim is to show how the physical and the virtual world can come together. The design, implementation, and performance of the show brought a lot of interesting things to the surface from a collaboration perspective across different fields. I was bringing a VR side to things, but we had sound experts. There was a whole sound installation with a 4x4x2 grid of speakers so that we could have spatial sound. We needed specialized people in that. We had actors as well who were involved, so we needed people trained in theatre, and all of that needed to be brought together. And it brought a lot of really good things. We realized that the co-presence phenomenon, so the idea of sharing a virtual environment with someone else, actually makes sense to people in a scientific sense, but also in an artistic sense. If you're wearing a virtual reality headset and you can see an actor, you have to wonder how much you can detach yourself from what the actor's doing and how you can share the same virtual reality environment while they're not wearing a headset. That's an interesting concept, and it's something that we found extremely interesting from a scientific and also an artistic perspective. I don't know how long I have to give this presentation, but I'm going to move forward a little bit. All right, I have 1 minute left. So here's one of the positives, but one of the negatives, or maybe one of the points of friction that personally affected me, was that it brings out the roles of each person involved in the project. I'm supposed to be more scientific, but because of the needs and the requirements of the time frame we were trying to work in, I kind of joined into the engineering pole as well, and I couldn't really do both at the same time. So one of the things that was a bit of a shame, at least in the context of this show, is that we weren't able to gather much data that I could use as a scientist because I was too involved setting up a data capture system as an engineer or helping out the artist. So that is certainly a shortfalling that emerged, at least as far as I was concerned, in the project, setting roles and allowing each person to fulfill their own role.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And so I'm going to be in charge of the remote control again. So, Pierre, I have a question that I've actually prepared. I have a cheat sheet. Very often there's talk about storytelling, which is something helping to understand projects. So, your storytelling, how about that? How is the body of the participant qualified through, or the bodies of the participants qualified in your storytelling? Okay, you've seen the three parts. I'd say this is most relevant when the participants become active, because in the first part, participants are seated mostly, so we actually decide where they are in space. But it's in the second part where they take part in what's going on. They are asked to hold to a rope, follow someone. And so because of this rope, they are connected to someone who's leading them. And in the final part, participants are able to interact with the system. Well, at least they're encouraged to do so. Sometimes they don't even notice that they're nudged, but since you have the actors in space and 12 participants, they will be led to consider their position within the group or within space. Hélène, that must somehow resonate with your project, bodies, movement groups. Well, yes, actually, that resonates a lot more than storytelling, because with us it's about the poetic power of the notion, the idea of a swarm. We are also at a change of scales, micro, macro, and there's the relationship to the audience. We actually love having an audience. That's part of our research methodology. In each of our labs, we have moments where we welcome the general public so that they can interact with our work. So you work with robots, but how can you identify an expressive quality with a robot? Well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge in terms of movement analysis. So we have movement analysts such as Audrey working with us. That's one of the fields of expertise. It's something that's been widely explored with dancers, and for example, the unique signature of a dancer. But here the aim is to analyze the movement of swarms. And so what it is about is to analyze, to have an immersive analysis of movement. Now, nothing's being written in advance, nothing's being scripted, and it's an emerging behavior, which means that there are several possibilities, several trajectories, possible trajectories. So what we're going to do is that we're going to transpose what we have learned through the analysis of human movements and apply it to robot swarms. So that is really what our challenge is about. Yes, as engineers, what we're interested in is the kind of reactions it's going to elicit in the audience. And also to echo what you said, Hélène, we need a space and a time to do scientific research, and from the very start, that is something that was taken into account. So we actually had surveys that were designed in advance, and all the methodology was well thought through in advance. So within our context, the first encounters with the public was experimental, but down the line we're going to also collect data. However, it requires time to do that, and so we need this feedback from the audience in order to quantify things in terms of reactions. Well, there's also been another challenge when we interacted with artists in residency. Now, after 2 residencies, we've reached a moment in time where we are able to understand the scientific experiments. So in a way, I don't know what, I think it was a new team, but David had already worked with artistic projects, and on our end, it was the first time that we engaged with such a scientific project. So the challenge for us is to understand what our artistic search is about, and then to sort of translate it into research carried out by engineers on materials. And so, we don't have all the answers now. We've already reached the 2nd year, and if we want to reach the outcome that we want, then it's going to take some time. We're going to have a prototype soon, but in order to implement the real vision we have, it's going to take more time. Well, and then there are publications that I'd like to mention. Those publications is also something that is enriching for our doctoral students. I'd like now to move on to the relationship to audience, how the audience is involved. Now, there are several moments when the audience can be involved. We decided to involve them ab initio, so from the very beginning. But beyond the artistic aspect of the project, the idea is also to do some outreach, to go to schools, etc. So from the very start, we wanted to do some outreach when sharing what we had learned, and that is also at the heart of how we work together as researchers. So how about you? You love your audiences, so outreach as well? So we meet them at our labs. As David said before, we designed surveys. Since we're working with 3 groups of robots, of swarms, we have specific questions regarding how the audience is perceiving those swarms. And then we're adding also something that's more of a qualitative approach. After having the audience fill out the survey, we engage directly, we have a conversation. So once they have interacted, we also collect qualitative data through exchange with the audience. You have seen in the video how the audience interacted with the swarms and with projections, and then the kind of that leads us to have a conversation with the audience. So within our project, we like to talk about 4 swarms, and so 3 that are comprised of robots, as Hélène said. So the very small ones, the flying ones, and the one also that is at the size of human beings. And then us, and the audience is the 4th swarm, as it were. So, and we really want also to have a successful relationship between the 4 swarms, so the 3 technical ones and the human swarm. And we're interested in seeing how they're going to develop their relationship. We're going to, and so this is why we always have some time to discuss it with the audience in order to see what reactions are elicited. So, for example, how they react to this bio-inspired swarms. So, I'm sure this seems sound management. In an interdisciplinary team, there are also some difficulties, and when everything is going swimmingly well, then everyone's happy. But sometimes not everything is so smooth. So, what, for example, when you get a result that you're not entirely happy with, that you don't find entirely convincing? And so, for example, there was this moment when you decide to change everything. Well, we know it's a process through repetition. It's an iteration. And so, in that case, you need to bring together everyone and to find out where there are differences, where the visions differ. And then the challenge is to find a common language. And then there are also aspects that are organizational, especially when you have several very different people who contribute to a project. So I think that now we have reached a level of maturity where we're going to actually get closer to set up or to have a prototype. Okay, processes, prototypes, David. So I think there's something that is very similar at the same time. So there's something highly conceptual in the way swarms work. It's a sort of dispersed concept and quantum mechanics as well. So here we started with robots, and everyone, students, artists, can play with the robots, choreographers. In your case, you can't really play around with quantum mechanics. I mean, that is a very different kettle of fish, and so that was much more difficult to actually have a real experience. How did you manage to work together? Answer. Well, there are 2 other members in our team, and the idea here is through a game to lead to a discovery of the rules of quantum mechanics. Now, this is something we focused on this year, and then there's an interaction with sculpture. So, in a way, we split the group, we divided it in 2 teams in order to be able to go further at an artistic level and also at other levels. Everyone needs their comfort zone, and asymmetry is not furthering the project. However, this also leads to some vagueness in the decision process, because there's what you say, there's what you don't say, there's what you would like to say, but you don't say. So we all have a sort of balance between these different dimensions. Now, do you have your own place for vagueness? Well, yes, in as much as you actually entrust people with their own expertise. In a way, so you engage in a struggle, that struggle is the zoo, and so we were 4 students with a variety of expertise, of skills. And so there was one who was in a leader position, and so the big decisions were taken by one person, but there were also the implementation or the micro decisions were taken by others. And so, for example, as an engineer, suddenly I will actually indulge myself in making an artistic decision. And so you don't need to be fully transparent or to discuss everything at all levels, but you also need to identify when there's an absolute need to share something. And so I'm certainly not advocating doing things randomly on your own, but I think that, yes, that vagueness between the different levels and that vagueness goes with basically being entrusted with an expertise. I'd like to quote Audrey, who said, well, that requires being humble, and we're all a bit naive outside our field of expertise. So, last question I'd like to raise is, are there interdisciplinary imaginaries? So, what shape can we give to our imagination when working together over time within a team where there are different temperaments, where there are different fields of expertise? At the end, can you dream together? Well, I think that yes, we do have dreams, and I can confirm that we dream a lot. There's this shared territory within shared territory for the swarm with a very horizontal approach. And so when you bring together engineers and artists and to share a territory, when you put them in a situation where they share sensitive resources, and when you invite them to experiment musical scores together, then you need to set up methodologies and experiments allowing all these people to work together. And this is how you can actually share a territory that is sensitive. You need, of course, to be attentive to put names on certain things or words on certain things, and develop a common shared language. And this is through the development of this shared language that step by step you manage to establish shared milestones. So I'm not really addressing the question of the imagination, but the emergence of shared sensitivities. Yeah, I think that a good share of that ontology or of that terminology is something that will be fed by the artistic side as well as by the engineering side. And so it is by borrowing from the different fields of expertise that you will develop this common ground, this shared language. And this is how the engineers will become a bit more artistic and the artists a bit more knowledgeable regarding engineering. And this is how we manage to get to a common understanding of choreographies and movement. When you're an artist, you do a lot with modest means. So, Claudia, you're a scientist. Mostly, I would add. So, Claudia, what is your experience of managing to create so much sensitivity with materials that you hardly handle? So, in a way, my question is about where do you draw a line to contain the effect? So, for example, an installation that is inspired by quantum mechanics does not mean that suddenly you're going to get into a different time-space dimension. Answer. Well, yes, it's a vision. It's something that you imagine. So you have an idea of what the installation is going to be at a given stage. And yeah, some people will be very able to jump head into virtual reality, and other generations may be less disposed to embark. So far we have had residencies with artists who were engaged and able to experience this. But I think we can go further. I think actually there is a new frontier that we still need to reach. I think that when we start describing this, we'll be able to get there. But so far, a part of it is in the imagination. Yeah. So, theaters, audiences, how do you construct meaning? Meaning? Do you think that for the participants, for the audience, this makes sense? I'm not sure I understand the question. Well, yes, you know, I can only suggest that can only suggest as a moderator to listen to other panels, and then you pick up notions. So, anyhow, joke aside. You said before that sometimes the audience is surprised, the participants or the actors do not know what's going on in the virtual world. So, yes, answer, indeed. There needs to be a means to tell the actors what is going on in the virtual world. Well, yes, because that actually changed our take on it, because instead of having something that is completely dynamic, we actually need to aim for something that is at least minimally similar. This is how the actors can have a representation, remember what is going on. However, we still need to make them aware 1, 2, or 3 times of what participants are likely to do. In a creative process, things shift very quickly. So if the actors are not aware, they may actually miss one of those shifts, and so they need to be kept in the loop at all times. David? Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Sense-making. So how do you make sense scientifically with that experiment in terms of what is the data you want to collect? So what is the scientific meaning that you can attribute to this experience? What I would have really liked is, at the end of the show, to check whether they understood, whether they felt in the same environment as the actors or not. The participants see the actors do things that are similar to what the participants do, and so I would have really liked to know whether they understood that they were sharing the same environment, that they were co-present, when in fact it is not a shared environment. However, by providing support or same interactions, same physical environment, is there a point where you can actually break down the barrier? But that is something that that's a different project. That's something that I will need to actually go look for because I haven't gathered the data yet. Question: would it be actually possible to have a different exhibit so that you could collect new data? Answer: yeah, that would actually be entirely possible since the show is still going on. So we could really just use a different series of the show to collect that data. The data could then be added to the system. Then I will have consolidated data or robust data, and then I could also operate with surveys. And then I won't be the technical director who is basically managing the whole show. Because often I'm rushed, and so I simply do not have time to interview the members of the audience. So yes, that could be a step forward. I would ask the same question, Jean-Ambroise. What about the meaning and sense-making? So with the imagination is what drives us on both sides, artistic and as artists, as engineers. Now, when swarms are deployed functionally, you can understand how the imagination plays a role, but you with quantum mechanics. Answer: regarding performance, well, there's a moment where we are completely involved in what is going on, and somehow there is almost some kind of transcendence. It's almost as if the material, the interaction with the material reflected on you. And I am seeking the same kind of interaction I have with the video games. So when we started placing lights in space with shadows, with lights, well, then we were creating an atmosphere that was complemented by the audio dimension. That is something that is very enticing, and that is exactly why I'd like to lead this shared experience between those witnessing the experience and the creators of the experience. Maybe we could actually break down the barrier between stage and audience. I mean, I see a few people in the audience. Do you actually have experienced the creation of an imaginary space that requests different disciplines to work together?
Ah, je crois que non.
I'm not quite sure. Léa took part in our residencies. Could you maybe tell us what your experience was? So you were an undergrad student, and suddenly you were immersed in this research project. Léa worked on documenting this experience, so that's quite a skill that's required here. So what was your experience? What can you tell us about your experience? Answer: I think everything happened at the same time, as it were. And at the beginning, I had trouble positioning myself. It was extremely interdisciplinary. I was an undergraduate. I hadn't had any prior experience that came close to that. And so I felt that there was a lot of sharing with the teaching staff, with the artists, etc. So a lot of things were given from the start, but nothing was rushed. And so step by step, things started to make sense. Before the residencies, each participant into the project had their idea of what it would become. However, with the residencies, mind maps started emerging, and so there was suddenly a shared understanding, despite the differences, and involving all the skills that we had, depending on whether we were artists or scientists. Allow me to broach yet another topic. What about the future researchers, those who are going to come after us? And also, how do we share our humanistic vision how do we pass on the way we consider what it is to be a researcher and how we can work and be at the service of a wider public.
Je me permets de rebondir sur vos interventions.
I'd like to pick up some of the things you mentioned. I'm part of the Dessin project, and something that I discovered is that we had a very horizontal collaboration process. It kind of mirrors what we study, right? We study swarms and we behave like a swarm. So myself as a student, I really felt like I had a place, I had a role to play in the overall group. And also when it comes to what is imaginary, I felt that this very horizontal organization, as you said, with the technical team, with the artistic team, with the engineering team, this allows some kind of synchronization of dreams over time. Imagination is something that's individual and subjective, but through doing regular mind maps and brainstorms and that kind of thing, we come to a point where everyone can express their own dreams over time, their own imagination over time. And I thought it was interesting how the organization can facilitate that. Fantastic. Thank you very much.